the temple in Ephesus was sponsored by the kings of this place. And so it was known as a world-class temple, one of the wonders of the world. This was not known as one of the wonders of the world, but it's contemporary to it and large like it and incredibly powerful. 1200 BCE to 547 BCE is the Lydian kingdom. If you lived in what is today Turkey or Anatolia, the Lydians were your masters during much of that period or part of that period. Why? They founded something they called money. And they didn't make it of gold. They made it of an amalgam called electrum. But the king would put his stamp on it. And the first stamp on coin was found from here. And he would guarantee the amount of electrum. And it became so widely traded that other countries got on board. When the Persians came here under Cyrus the Mede, when the Medo-Persian king came here and defeated King Croesus, he took back much of that idea of money. Money became pervasive. Basically, from the end of the Old Testament period, everybody starts using money. But it started here, ground zero at Sardis, okay? One of the things I want you to know about Sardis, the picture I have is laurels. Someone who's standing on their laurels. This is all about, we have been great. Some of you have been to this church that once was 2,000, now is 600, but all their talk was, to use Springsteen's term, the glory days. They're always looking back to the glory. I remember when this church was so full that we just had people sitting out in the aisles. And they are living the day that isn't anymore. Sardis is going to be the church that's sitting on its laurels, talking about what it used to be. They had a reputation, they just didn't have a reality. We're going to do that at the other site. Here I want to talk about this town. With the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, the Artemisian. And if you've ever preached anything from the letter to the Ephesians, you know that it was a world-class site, the Artemisian. When you look around, do you see geologically that these hills are different than the ones you've seen? These are not solid stone, solid rock hills. They're alluvial hills. That is, they're hills that were pushed up as ancient seabeds, and they become actual movable soil. The bed of the river down here gave flecks of gold, and so they were able to mine this, and early on in the kingdom this became very, very important. It made them incredibly wealthy. Their chief king that we talk about most of all was King Croesus. This is a very wealthy culture that comes to a very startling stop when Cyrus the Mede comes here, and there is a time when it looks like the Lydians are surrounded by the Persians who have made their way all the way out here. And by the way, if you make a straight shot out of Persia, you'll end up here on your way to places like Pergamum and places on the coast. This whole thing hinged on one simple event. This was a very well-fortified kingdom. And if you go up there, sadly, Croesus's kingdom after the fall of Croesus in 547 has been looted more than any other archaeological site. Why? Because he was the guy that antiquity remembers as the father of gold. So who knew that people would rob his site, okay? Croesus was like, when you mention him in ancient sources, it would be Mr. Money, okay? In 547, the Persians come up, and Croesus is not worried. He has very good fortifications, he's got a very good spot, and he's got around him a fortress wall. I can only show you a few pieces of it left that haven't been plundered, but the wall itself was pretty impregnable, and he felt like he was just not touchable. And the problem with the site was, the site goes up to one side and then drops off. So they had a wall line that went up part way, but actually didn't have a wall at the peak. They didn't need one. And the wall, when it came down the front of the slope here, over behind the trees here, and wrapped around and went back upward, that wall was a very, very big wall. The story is told, and Herodotus passes the story later, that there was a soldier out one night. The Persians were encamped around, and the soldier lost his helmet. It blew off of his head and went over the wall. There was at the bottom of the wall a large rampart or glacis to stop anyone from using a battering ram. According to the story, a guy popped out of the middle of the glacis in a little window, grabbed his helmet, closed the glacis, and went back up on the roof, thus exposing how to get in from down below. And Croesus's kingdom falls. This powerful, impregnable kingdom. This isn't our time period. It's well before, it's 500 years before our time period, but it's way cool to see. This is, by the way, the largest single synagogue from antiquity that we have. That's the largest one. And what's interesting to me, it was originally part of the bath complex that was here before it. So apparently some Jews lived in town and thought, bath complex, that'd be a great place to build our synagogue. And they come and they buy up the property. It doesn't mean they stop using the property as a bath complex, because the rest of this is also operating. It means perhaps the town council realizes they built too much and they can pick up a piece of property and turn it into a synagogue. You know, play it out the way we would for a local church. You're standing in the main hall of a 200s AD bath complex, okay? Imagine that there would be big areas over top. Some areas are open to the sky, some areas are closed, so the next room over there would be entirely closed. Remember that these large halls have in them everything from places to go for an apothecary to things to read, magazine stands, popine, all kinds of things that you can get for your pleasure. This is the main heart of town if you're at 200 AD, okay? I'm stopping you here because I want to stop and take a look for a moment at the letter. And I want you to think about this incredible site that has this great past. Sardis is a place with a past. Here's what the letter to Sardis said. And to the angel of the church in Sardis write, these things says he who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead. Be watchful. Strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die, for I have not found your works perfect before God. Remember therefore how you have received and heard. Hold fast and repent. Therefore, if you will not watch, I will come upon you as a thief, and you will not know what hour I have come upon you. You have a few names, even in Sardis, who have not defiled their garments. And they shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. He who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now think about this place and what you've seen so far, because we're going to leave soon, and I just want you to take a moment and think about what you've seen. You've seen a great kingdom. Croesus and the Lydians had a great kingdom. It was collapsed on top of them. It died. One of the things you noticed is that by the New Testament period, you've come upon a place that continues to be a Roman place, a Roman center, quite a bit of wealth. Their public buildings are pretty impressive, and that's going to happen all the way from the 2nd and 3rd and 4th centuries up to the synagogue is used up until the 600s. So you've got a place that had significant wealth. It's also the place with the largest synagogue in the world that we find outside of Eretz Israel, outside of Israel. And what's interesting is it's into a world like this, with all of the luxury and wealth, that Christianity first entered. It's interesting because they came into the Roman world when Attalus III deeded the city over to Rome. Rome didn't have to conquer the city, it was written into somebody's will. But when they took it, they took the wealth, they took the banks, they took the Pactolus River and the gold. All of this became a wonderful place. Listen, if you're a Roman and you're a provincial ruler, this is a plum. You want to rule here. It's got a lot of money, a lot of great fruits and vegetables, lots of great clothing. This is a center for all of that. It's an extremely important province. It's one of the richest, and it's the political plum. But it's also a center since the Lydian period all the way through the Hellenistic period. It's a hotbed center for gods and goddesses. Now, I was talking to you about this reputation of Sardis. And did you notice that Jesus says some things to them in his letter? He says, it's written from the one who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. It's interesting. This was the banking capital of the 7 churches. The banking capital was here. It's by the way, this would have been Switzerland. This would have been where everybody's central bank was. Okay? So imagine that you're in a place where you have this incredible central bank, and he says, I am the one who holds all 7 churches. You might hold their markers, their notes, and their banking, but I'm the one who holds the whole operation. Jesus reminds them of who, in fact, he is. But I love that he also says something to them. He says, there are a few of you who have not defiled your garments. Remember that when you get your laundry done, you're in a bath. You get your clothes clean when you get you clean. So the way they do that is you have a person who comes with you. If you're a person who's like a paterfamilias of a family, a father of a family, you bring one of your slaves with you and they carry your coats. This is the word used of Paul when at the stoning of Stephen, the guy who carries the coats that comes into the bath. You send your guys with your cloak, you take off your toga, and you're going to send it out. And what they're going to do is take it to the local cleaners, and they're going to drop it into a vat of urine that has been collected on the corners all over town. Okay? There's going to be a slave whose job it is to stand there and be the plunger. And so he stands in the urine all day. No word on what he does at night, but nevertheless, he stands there all day long, and then they take this out. Now, they're not going to just put it in the ammonia of urine and then put it back on you, okay? So what happens is they're going to put it then into a water wash, and then they're going to agitate it in a water wash. Then they're going to move it to another wash that has usually some kind of fragrance like rose water in it, something that will make it, kind of dull the urine smell, tamp that down. And then after that, when they get it done, have you ever seen these quick erecting tents that you buy? They're dome tents. You know what I'm talking about? They would make an igloo of sticks that look like a dome tent and put your cloth over top of it and then take sulfur in blocks and light it underneath. And the sulfur would smoke terribly up through the cloth, but it would turn your toga virilis, your toga, it would turn it white. And anything that you had that was a stain in it, the guy would be sitting there rubbing out all of your stains. Defiled garments were what came into the cleaners. What goes out are clean garments, right? By the way, after the sulfur, you don't have to worry about the smell of the urine. The sulfur's worse. At that point, what you do is you put it back into the rose water, then you hang it back up. How many of you think that sounds like it's going to take a few hours? It is, but you got a few hours and you're spending it at the bath. I love to go, in Malta, there is a tomb that if you stand next to this tomb, it says, I miss our wine and baths together. It's not written by a guy to his lover, it's written by a guy to his lawyer. They spent so long talking about his financial and his legal situation at the baths that he really missed the guy when he was gone and sent the nice inscription. At any rate, did you notice what he says to the church? He says, you have a name, but you are dead. That's why I gave you laurels. This is a church that's living on a reputation. Guys, think about it. Every great liberal seminary that you know started off not liberal. Every great institution that utterly rejects the Bible as God's word, most all of them started off being actually very strong Bible-believing Christians. You can show up in seminaries, and if you get to know what's going on there, you'll know they're not what they were when you were in school. Things are changing fast. We all agree? Things are changing rapidly. And what's happening is people are living off their reputation. What Jesus said to them was, be watchful. I'm always mindful that Crassus had his capital of Lydia here, and that whole story with the oracle, it's almost like Cyrus took the city while people slept in arrogant pride, and now Jesus says, by the way, with your history in Sardis, you might want to stay watchful and stay awake. I think that he calls on them to strengthen what remains. So he says to them, a few of you are going to walk in white. By the way, the white class of toga was not the same as the toga virilis. A white class of toga is a class for the ruling class of the city. The Bolletarian or town council wore a lighter garment than everyone else. So they sort of sparkle when they walk by, okay? And what I want you to see is, Jesus said, there's a few people that I'm going to confess before God and my angels. Let me stop and wrap this up and say one simple thing here. You can live off of a vibrant walk with Jesus, or you can live off of a reputation where you used to have one. And one of the greatest dangers in ministry today is trafficking in unlived truth. And I'm telling you, the longer you walk with Jesus and the longer you serve in ministry, the more you're going to be tempted to live on yesterday's spiritual growth. Personally, let me just say that the Lord always had a certain way of dealing with me. People always came to Christ in our ministry just at the time of my low point spiritually. Now everybody's going to try to calculate when those were. But often when I would find myself at my weakest, that's when Jesus would show up, right? Yep. And it was kind of a smack. I want you to just stop and think about the people who are living off their reputation. And then I want you to stop and say to yourself, look at that building, let it stamp you, that you can have the big building in town. You can have the cool buses and all the electronics, but you can be absolutely empty, phoning it in and living off of yesterday's growth. And this place, this bath complex and gymnasium, I want you to think about where you are in the spiritual gym of what you're doing. And I want you to think of this place with a laurel, something that they would put on your head when you did well, but something you would put on your wall and claim that you were someone great long after your body no longer looked like it did when you competed in that contest. There's a lot of us spiritually doing that. So Sardis, sometimes called the church of deadness because he says you are dead. To me, it's living on the laurels of yesterday's reputation.